Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about self-esteem. Early on my spiritual growth path, someone told me, you can't really love another person until you love yourself. And I'll tell you, I think that's bullshit. In fact, it was my self-hatred, my unresolved emotional issues, and my tremendous self-centered fear, which had created this prison of addiction and depression, anxiety, and quite a few forms of what I would call self-harm. And the brain that caused the problem can't solve the problem. So at least early on in my path, focusing on loving myself was not only impossible, but it was just going to throw another loop in my already myopic pattern of self-absorption. Now, I was self-absorbed because my self was all fucked up and couldn't function very well in the world, and I kept trying to fix it or make it do something so that I could be a functioning person. I was like a person with their car that was crashed, beating on the motor and the fenders with a sledgehammer, hoping to fix it. Didn't work so good. And I was introduced to the concept of self-esteem. And self-esteem is my ideas about my own worth and value, my confidence in my abilities, my self-respect. And I have not grown in self-esteem from other people giving me awards or taking hot baths or from praying and meditating alone in my room. I have grown in self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. I have confidence in my abilities because I have put time and effort into developing them. And I have self-respect because I act in respectable ways. Now, ways that I respect, maybe not ways other people respect. And our relationship with ourself is a living relationship. Over time, I have come to a place where how I feel about myself is much more important than how other people feel about me. But that took a long time. I did not have accurate self-appraisal, and I still gather and value the honest feedback of those that I trust. I have a therapist, a spiritual advisor, and a handful of really trusted friends, and I talk to all of them frequently. So if I want to feel good about myself, I need to do things I feel good about. It's funny, over the last year, I've done something I always wanted to do. I got a sleeve tattoo in 3 different installments. In fact, I'm having a last piece of work done on it in a couple of weeks, and I love it. But my ex-husband didn't like tattoos, and I was an art teacher in a Catholic school, and it was a combination of not being quite ready to integrate that part of myself into my social life, and probably not caring that much, that I put it off. And over the last few years, kind of dedicating myself to bringing all of who I am into the world in hopes that it might be helpful to other people, getting my tattoos has not only been quite fun and creative, but there's also something honest about it. And I had dinner the other night with my ex-mother-in-law, and I know she has tremendous judgment about the fact that I got these tattoos. And I love her dearly, and she's from a different generation, but I feel really good about the fact that I don't care what she thinks. That my opinions about what I do with my body are more important than what other people think about it. And that was not always the case. In fact, in my own continuing process, I had an art show a few years ago, and part of the night's events was a fashion show. And quite a few of the models had sleeve tattoos. And I was standing with one of my very good friends, and I said, I've always wanted a sleeve tattoo. And he said, well, why don't you get one? And I said, oh, I'm too old. I was 54 at the time. And he looked at me all crazy. And I heard my own ageism. Some story I had been told that you can't get tattoos over 50. And I made up my mind at that moment that I would get a sleeve tattoo. And I've had many inspired ideas. And when I put in the work to bring them to completion, that builds my self-esteem. Because I'm keeping a promise to myself. I've been betrayed a lot in my life by family, lovers, and friends. And I have been a betrayer myself. I've lied. I've cheated, and I was a pretty accomplished thief at one point. I try not to do those things today because they undermine how I feel about myself. Stealing reinforces that I can't get things directly, that I'm unworthy, that I need to take them. When I lie, I'm giving myself the message that my truth is not to be trusted, and that if I tell my deepest truth, the universe will abandon me. So although it's easy for me to lie to make other people happy, I really try not to do it today. Lying and dishonesty really lower the vibration and make it inauthentic. My experience has been and continues to be that the more authentic I am, the more empowered, the more creative, the more fulfilled my life is. When I show up in honesty, the universe meets me on that level. In fact, telling the truth and being aware of what it is within myself, telling my truth, knowing my own truth, emotionally, mentally, materially, relationally, is the needle on the compass of my life. And having the courage or the balls, and those can be a little different, to tell the truth, and having the tools to know how to tell that truth and when to tell that truth, and when to perhaps withhold it, continue to be some of the most important moving parts in my own personal process. So growing in self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. Now, getting a tattoo may or may not be an esteemable act, but keeping a promise to myself is. And I was lied to a lot as a child. Not overtly, but there were many things I was promised that never happened. And there was a lot of emotional dishonesty in the gap between what my parents said and how they actually acted. And I internalized that in myself. I always knew what the right answer was in most situations, but my inability to follow through and walk my own talk deeply undermined how I felt about myself because I knew I was full of shit, even if you didn't know. And so one of the first places I was instructed to grow was in the ability to show up. I was famous for canceling plans based on how I felt. If I was anxious or hungover, depressed, or just generally didn't want to put out the effort, I'd blow you off. And deep inside, it chipped away at how I felt about myself. Sometimes I'd feel extremely guilty, but not always. But although I considered myself a good friend, and I wanted to be a valued employee, I didn't act that way. So learning to show up, no matter how I felt about it, and that was often super hard to do, was part of the foundation of this new structure I was building called Renee. And doing hard things makes us stronger, just like lifting weights in the gym. One of the very unwise things about modern Western culture is the obsession with comfort, with convenience, with avoiding resistance. And although I have my fair share of comfort and convenience in my life, I'll admit I'm addicted to Amazon Prime, arrives tomorrow. Too much ease and comfort make me soft, fat, weak. We need resistance in our life. If we don't use it, we lose it. And learning to lean into my own growing edge to do the scary or uncomfortable thing has become a working part of my life. And I love that about myself. And for my first 25 years, I did not have it. Probably the second most important principle for me to grow in love and esteeming myself is to practice selfless service. The best treatment for self-centeredness is selflessness. And I don't say self-centeredness with judgment. I felt like an animal caught in a trap trying to gnaw off its own leg so I could escape. Horrible, dramatic image, but for me it was true. Now, the metaphor doesn't hold out because turning away from a caught leg doesn't free the animal. But to treat others the way that I wanted to be treated made me feel good about myself. Maybe for the first time. I was given this little spiritual practice challenge to do a good deed every day and keep it a secret. If I told someone about it, it didn't count. It might be helping someone put their grocery bags in the trunk, wiping down a sink in a public restroom, picking up some trash, feeding a wild bird, giving money to a homeless person with a kind and loving word. I hope things get better for you. And I started to build a relationship with the universe, that no good deed goes unrecognized. And I started to build my own spiritual storehouse of goodwill that was just for me. When I expanded that principle the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I learned how to be generous. And I donated my time, my artwork. I still have a sliding scale for my therapy clients because I don't do this for money. And I remember when I only had a $5 bill in my wallet, and my first 3 therapists had a sliding scale for me. And what we put out, we get back. And when I give freely, I receive freely. And in learning to genuinely love others, I have learned to love myself. And I'm going to end with this wonderful poem I was given right at the beginning of this quest for self-love. And it's written by my favorite poet, Anonymous. It's called If the Man in the Mirror. When you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, then go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't a man's father, mother, or wife whose judgment upon he must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in life is the man staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You can fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but the final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited. I have started to integrate my artwork into spiritual psychology on my new Instagram page, at @spiritual_psychology, spelled like the title of this podcast. I'm kind of obsessed with creating artwork right now. I just got an iPad Pro, and I'm having so much fun. I hope you'll check it out. If you want to get a free download of the first chapter of my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, there's a link in the show notes. And shoot me an email if you want to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life. info@reneemckenna.com. Thanks so much for sharing this podcast with others. It's growing, and I appreciate the opportunity to spread this work. Deep gratitude as always to my supporters on Patreon. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.